The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views or endorsement of any entity. Nothing being said on this podcast should be considered as investment advice. Derek is affiliated with Collab Plus Currency and may hold positions in assets discussed in this episode. Always conduct your own research and consult with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 100 Proof. I am Kevin Rose. I am dressed in somewhat winter gear because I'm in Los Angeles. It is.
We're under attack.
We're under siege right now. It's freaking beautiful outside right now, and it kills me because literally a half hour ago it was pouring rain. It doesn't kill me. I'm happy now that it's beautiful, but I had to scarf it up and jacket it up and all that stuff. I am joined today. Oh, wait, this is our weekly NFT non-fungible token variety show covering all things non-fungible. I am joined by Sam Punk 9059. If you're looking it up on Blur, Punk 9059 is his actual punk. Sam, good to see you.
What's going on?
Sam is in a different climate, and I've been told has orange snow pants on right now. Is that true?
I may or may not be true.
It's a little chilly where
Prove
you are.
it.
I
Prove
mean, when you're sitting at your desk, the pants are not part of the question.
That's true. That's true. Derek Edwards, of course, my co-host in this crazy thing. Derek, good to see you.
Yes, sir. Good to see you guys. I'm excited for this one. It has been a crazy week in non-fungibles.
Yes, let's get into it. So I think Sam is probably the one that's been the most impacted here in terms of his ability to forecast and look into the data, and it's been chaos. Sam, what the hell's going on?
Man, I don't even know where to start. But I think the basic story is that ever since the Blur token drop happened, and that token got to a $3 billion valuation, and Blur said we are going to be giving out 300 million more of the token over the next 6 months. The entire narrative has just been airdrop farming. I mean, and the liquidity that provides. And I think everybody's trying to figure out, how do I profit from this? How do I and that can be people who are rebalancing their portfolio. Obviously, I think the biggest example of this was Mando and OSF to, from Degens, from Degens.finance, also have Rec Guy, experienced guys dumped 72 Bored Apes in 1 second. Sorry, I actually think it was like 2 minutes, but $9.1 million of Bored Apes they just dumped into Blur bids, and the floor didn't even move. So you just have crazy dynamics. And then the side thing that, I don't think this is established enough to be a trend, but over the past few days, you've just started to see art volume really fall down a bunch. You're not seeing the art blocks trade.
So Sam, tell me a little bit about, I want to know about this airdrop farming for people that don't know what that actually means, and they're not in this ecosystem and they're not doing this. What are you doing? You're selling something. What are you receiving? And how is there not potential danger of actually being at a net loss? Because when you sell in I guess the idea is that you eventually buy back into these assets that you want. You might be, I guess you'd be buying in at a lower price. And how are people thinking about this?
It's a challenging thing, because one thing that Blur has done, I think, pretty consistently and pretty well in sense of achieving their own objectives, is they're not very explicit about what gets you what. They give you a basic idea. They say, we reward loyalty. We reward bids. And what they've been going after is as many bids as possible. They want to have the tightest bid-ask spreads in the market. So if you want to go buy an NFT, you go to Blur. If you want to go sell an NFT, you go to Blur. And what they're doing to do that is they're basically saying, the thing was the most prevalent over the past couple months was they said, what we are really going to reward is people putting collection bids on big projects. So saying, I will buy a Moonbird at 6.5 ETH no matter what, and being as close to floor as possible. So what people are doing is trying to get as close to floor, but once you get hit, then you lose your benefits. So there's just been a ton of people trying to put bids on, with the goal of just earning rewards from Blur. And when the market cap was so big, looking forward, I think that Blur is going to be giving, based on the current token price is going to be given about $1.5 million of Blur every single day to the community. So when that is happening, you can make mistakes. you can get hit with your NFTs if you can sell them later, because you're getting that token, which is so valuable. And I think, the people who are getting wrecked are the people who are trying to do the airdrop farming, but there are big players. Like there were 10 people who traded more than 10,000 ETH on Blur last week. These are, to put that in perspective, OpenSea as an entire exchange had days where it only did 5,000 ETH total over the past couple months. You had individuals who traded 10,000 ETH on Blur. Machi Big Brother is the biggest player here. He's traded well above that. So the people who I think are getting wrecked are the people who are trying to play this game, and then bid walls are just disappearing. Someone will say like, I will buy, call it literally 500, and people put in enough ETH to buy 500, Moonbirds or stuff like that, and then just pulled them away. And a lot of people who, were kind of lining up their bids below that, thought they were safe, got hit. So those are the people who I think felt the most pain. I think for people who want to rebalance their portfolio, they've been sitting on NFTs that they don't believe in long term, and they just want to use this as an opportunity to sell. Like this has actually provided a pretty good opportunity for people like that. And that's what Mando and OSF did. And you do see a little bit of that.
This is mostly hitting projects that are PFP related, would you say, right? Like they're not like, we're not seeing massive, super rare or unique one of ones drop through this. It's more the larger collections. Is that true or not?
Yeah. I think it's mainly the larger collections, and they even said they want the higher liquidity collections to be doing this. But yesterday there was a Art Blocks Bright Moments drop, that was trading around 2.1 ETH, and there was an airdrop farming Blur wall set up there at 2.09 ETH. So I think it is going to extend to other projects as well. It was a project called Metropolis, and there was a ton of trading on OpenSea, and then there was an airdrop farming wall. So you do start to see it there. Nouns in the past had never traded more than 5 nouns in a single day. And then over the weekend, 60 nouns traded, so they're just kind of picking random collections. I wouldn't say I'm sure it's not random, but they are picking different collections, and it's not always just mutant apes, bored apes, moonbirds, doodles. Like it does get around a little bit.
Everything you said made sense. I would say there's so many stories here that we can actually talk about. There's the story of this march towards hyper efficiency, and to start to take the NFT wrapper and to have it look comparable to how markets work in traditional finance, and incentivizing both sides of the marketplace in the way Blur has is now marching us forward to a place of efficiency in terms of these bid-ask spreads and being able to find sellers on the other side of a market very quickly and being able to find buyers on the other side of a market quickly. That's a story I think that is fairly interesting. There's the story of what does the world of royalties look like post Blur and OpenSea, and over the last couple of months, like the tension between those two and the market dynamics that have shifted and changed. And how does that apply to one-of-one artists versus very big size collections, or generative art versus PFPs? And can we actually fine-tune these knobs in a more granular fashion, given kind of the changing market structures that we're seeing? There's also the story of, is this a sign of times to come? Is Blur's playbook and this incentivized playbook to kind of create these new market forces structurally for the NFT wrapper? Does this mean something for the future of OpenSea? Does it mean something for the future of where people buy and sell NFTs, or are we going to see a reflexive kind of bounce back to these very specific economies, or vertical marketplaces who start to create their own trading experiences as a result of trying to capture some of the lost revenues that are now flowing, that are now moving elsewhere? And so I think there's so many stories and so many angles to take. I'm curious, do you have a sense for the answer to any of those questions? And I guess a high level view of where are we going, Sam?
I got opinions on all of them, which
you choose. Dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. I think you got to differentiate between a world where a company is giving people $1.5 million to incentivize something versus real market activity. And that's not to say that. So I think to say, does this set the stage for is this innovation? Is this the future? I think that's pushing it, because what's happening here is that the crypto traders of the world have blessed Blur with a $3 billion market cap, and they're sharing that $1.5 million with the market every day. To me, the question is, if you remove that, which is what's happening in the stock market, which is what's happening in the bond market, do we look any different than we looked a couple weeks ago? And I think you remove the fees, and, CryptoPunks have shown us, I think that you probably have a little bit tighter bid ask there, but that's a little bit where my question comes is like, and I saw this at Uber all the time. Like when I worked at Uber, I launched Uber in China, and we would basically pay people to do rides. And every city would be sitting around celebrating that they were doing more rides than the last guy. And it was just a vanity metric, because the minute you stop paying people, then you actually have, like, the whole world changes. So I think you have a little bit of that going on here.
Yeah, this is my problem, you guys. Like the thing that we've all lived and been in this ecosystem long enough to see these mechanics at work in one way or another. And not applied to NFTs, but in other spaces. Like when Terra was giving us 20% APY, fuck yeah, let's throw some money into Terra. It's 20%. Like, hell yeah, I'm on Terra, right? And then that failed. They ran out of capital. And you remember Do Kwon saying, "Oh, we got to recapitalize. We got to get more money in here so that we can pay people this API and keep it going for at least another 6 months or another 8 months." So my question is, like, I get why people are doing this. There's no doubt. I mean, it's money. It's the king of all kings of drivers of activity, right? The question is, why hold the Blur token, and what is the value there long term? Every degen friend of mine that I have, and I don't have that many, but I have a handful, first thing they tell me is, "Oh yeah, I got my Blur, I got my ETH now. I converted to ETH." And that's the story the majority of them tell me. Why should this coin exist? And I'm not hating on Blur. I just want to know, what's the real purpose for this outside of just giving people loyalty rewards? And maybe that's enough.
I think that is the existential question that a lot of applications, layer 1s, layer 2s, decentralized apps all are trying to answer. And I think the answer is going to depend on the product value that's trying to get created over years. I will say, regardless of whether or not we can answer that question, it's the only question, Kevin. Like, you're asking the only right question. But regardless of whether or not we can answer that question, it is clear that the market does price in the option value of these tokens and their ability to potentially generate revenue in the future today. And so we've seen this time and time again with things like the Uniswap token, which, does what does the Uniswap token do? I think we can all kind of debate that it's achieving its purpose, or maybe it's not achieving its purpose, but it is being valued in the multi-billions of dollars in terms of FDV today. I would say, like, the only real tokens in my view that have had like success finding product market fit are like blockchain tokens, things that are used to incentivize consensus and operate as like the network shelling point for making these blockchains work. And Ethereum has proved over time that you can create really clever dynamics to bring value back to token holders through burning these tokens and other sorts of like value accrual mechanisms to make these blockchains that have product market fit these blockchain tokens for blockchains be valuable. And given like that they have product market fit, people are writing to these databases constantly. But to answer your question, I think it's hard to say exactly how this thing will drive value back to token holders in the future. I think the market will still price this thing at a level based on the option of like where this product could go. And I think that's what we're seeing.
I think it's a subconscious or maybe slightly conscious proxy for equity, right? Like they're thinking, like, if you're holding a Uniswap token, you're saying, and I don't know what they do in terms of like a reduction of fees or things like that. I haven't looked into that, but obviously there's the governance component to it as well. But in some way, if you can't hold Uniswap, the corporate entity, the token is your next best thing in terms of there being a proxy for ownership. Now, the SEC would freak out with those words, right? But like, does that vibe with you all?
So I tend to think of these networks as being so different than equity. They're just different systems. And the problem is we have a very specific set of rules. We have the 1933 Securities Act. We have the 1934 Securities Act. We have tests like the Howey test, which is based on case law that has been developed around this legislation. But that stuff is over 100 years. I mean, like about 100 years old, right? And so we've got this new form of value creation that's purely digital, lives on the internet, yet the only thing that we can actually map it to is this thing called equity. And I don't think that's right. I think this is a different animal. And I think what we've seen with the rise of Ethereum and Solana and Avalanche and layer twos and the rise of decentralized applications and the fact that these are largely credibly neutral and anyone can, push code and operate and be a part of the network in all sorts of different ways. Like there's lots of ways people can contribute to these open source networks. It's hard for me to sit here and say like this is like equity because I just don't think that's true.
I get what you're saying, because in some sense, equity is just a right to vote, right, and a ledger of ownership in the total issued shares, right?
No, I mean you got to incorporate that equity is a right to future cash flows. I mean that's like the most important part of it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That's right. It's tough, but that's what. But again, to your point, Sam. I mean, Derek, you kind of said that some people are thinking this is a right to future cash flows when they buy and hold this token.
I mean, it is hard. I don't even. There are two conversations here. We could talk all day about if Blur should be valued at $3 billion, or if in any other kind of format and ecosystem it would be given that valuation. Or you can look at the fact that ApeCoin has maintained $5 to $6 billion valuation for the past 6 months. Dogecoin is worth $12 billion, even though, it's an intentional meme. There is just like a mimetic value that the community just, whether or not an economist would agree with it.
It's
like
true.
The world is just ascribing it.
These are not efficient markets and these are not intelligent markets. Like these things are also being valued irrespective of all the things that I just described. For me, Doge in particular.
Doge is very clear to me. You're buying culture. It's a way to buy culture, right? And it's in I have yet to ever see any friend of mine say, "Hey, can I send you some Doge?" Like it just doesn't happen because you're buying it for the memeability of it, and maybe that's okay. Like I don't know. Anyway, we should probably move on to the next story.
We've moved on from the NFT show to the equity show here.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing I just wrap that up with, if it's okay, is like, do you think like I said, we can talk, but I think it isn't I do think you do have an environment where you can just assume that maybe not, but that $1.5 million is going to be going to the community every single day for the next 6 months to people who do what Pac-Man and Blur tell them to do, and I just think this is going to have a very ongoing impact on the ecosystem. And I don't think this is like, the things I'd be looking at are new buyers coming into the ecosystem, are royalties paid going up, are like, those are are prices going higher. Like yesterday I had the most volumes in 9 months and the average NFT price went down, so that just shows you what's happening. Like those are the types of metrics I've started to look at, but I do think we need to accept in reality, like this is probably going to continue unless the crypto market decides Blur is worth a lot less than it currently is.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I mean, you're pegging that 1.5 million per day is not a by any means a certain, that there's no level of certainty around that, right? The price could drop it to a quarter of what it is today, then it'd be a lot less unless they increase the distribution of the supply. So we just don't know, right? But that's where it is today.
That's where it is now,
yeah.
This is a good, I think a good time to reflect on a couple of things, and like maybe this tees up our next story, which is, regardless of what we think is going on in terms of like this token and these incentives, like it is fundamentally changing the way that the trade of digital objects is happening in real time, and there are real second order effects that are happening. And I think one of those second order effects are things like art blocks announcing kind of a reinvigorated emphasis on the creator and like trying to protect creator royalties. And so, Kev or Sam, maybe you guys can talk about kind of like the news that's been coming out this week around that project.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one of many that is slated to. It would not surprise me if we see other large collections and large projects kind of follow suit here and announcing the creation of their own exchange. I don't know that it's necessary. I know, Derek, you have a lot more kind of like history and background here and directly working with Snowfro on figuring some of this stuff out. There's like artist royalties, in my opinion, are a very important thing to maintain going forward. Like we need to figure out a way to protect them. I think it's going to be a lot more dynamic than people think, meaning like I don't think there's a one size fits all here. I think QQL was the first one on my radar that said, hey, we're building this into the contract. I don't know if they were able to sidestep Blur or not. Do you guys know if QQL is on Blur or not? Because I know they wrote in some protections there against royalty-free marketplaces to prevent the trading of their token. Snowfro has been against that. But last time I spoke with him about this, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, he didn't want to create a new contract that tried to play the whack-a-mole game of blocking these other marketplaces. So what do we know about this release? And I'll leave it to either one of you. What do we know that ArtBlocks is going to do? Because I don't think there was a ton of information here.
Yeah, Sam, do you want to pick up first, and then I'll fill in some of the holes?
Yeah, I mean, I read the announcement. I talked about it on our daily show today, about what I know. But I'd definitely love to hear Derek, because I think they're it wasn't super clear from Purple Hat exactly. My read on it though was that they're gonna make it so that listings that are out there, they're gonna incorporate royalties back into them if they're listed without royalties. Now, if you don't want to pay royalties, you just go to the exchange that doesn't enforce them. So, you will continue to have that option. But I do think what it does do is at least right now, X2Y2 allows the buyer to decide whether or not to pay royalties, but Blur and OpenSea both hide it from the buyer. So buyers who say, hey, I just believe in paying royalties don't really have that option. And I think it does seem to add that back in. That seems like something new. But Derek, tell me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Sam. All those are the right points. I would say they... the announcement that just came out is essentially bolting on greater functionality for buying and selling digital art on the ArtBlocks platform without actually having a full-fledged marketplace like we would see on an OpenSea or a Sansa or some of these other more like marketplace-like functions. ArtBlocks in its current form isn't really a marketplace, right? It's a platform for people to sell digital art. And in the secondary, largely a lot of those buys and sells have been happening off of ArtBlocks historically. They've been happening in places like OpenSea, or they've happened in OTC deals between peer-to-peer between folks, or they've happened on platforms like Sansa. ArtBlocks is this announcement, I think this week, was an articulation of, listen, in order to retain some of the value of creator royalties, we want to start putting a little bit more infrastructure and investment into having there be an option for buyers and sellers to go through ArtBlocks to be able to do some of this stuff without the kind of the bells and whistles of a full-fledged marketplace. Now, whether or not they invest further into a secondary marketplace that's a little bit more robust and, kind of a comp to some of the typical marketplace infrastructure we've seen in the past, I think that's an open question. But I do think that they are planting a flag in the ground and saying this is at least a first step in the direction of trying to protect some of our ecosystem participants, whether that's collectors, whether that's creators, it's the artists, and so on and so forth.
Is it really putting a flag in the ground? How is it protecting anyone? It's just another marketplace. If I'm a trader, screw going to ArtBlocks. I'll just go straight to any of the royalty free platforms and make the trade. How does this protect them?
Yeah, so I would say it protects them in the sense that if volumes start flowing to ArtBlocks and it becomes a place where the aggregation of buyers and sellers occur, and it becomes a liquidity hole for where generative art trades, I think it does do a job of royalty normalizing those trades, given kind of some of the articulation of what they're aiming to do as Purple had announced this week. I would say, to your point though, Kevin, I think the outstanding question is whether or not buyers and sellers will aggregate on ArtBlocks. And what would need to happen for them to do that would be to either create a more compelling product or a superior product for trade that services these different end users in really interesting ways, whether there's incentives that may be tied into that.
It has to be loyalty. It has to be something loyalty related. Any great business that has competition for a similar product or service, call it airlines, you name it, they all introduce some type of loyalty program to try and hook in and bring in their most valuable customers and hold them for the long term. And I just feel like if I'm on ArtBlocks and I'm being loyal and I'm paying royalties and I'm doing everything that you want me to do, like, give me something so I'm eligible or have a slightly better odds at minting one of those overly subscribed, future art blocks releases or drops, right? Like, I would want a little bit more here to show that, hey, I'm a good actor in this realm. Like, how can you give me a little something? I'm not asking for a cash drop. I'm not asking for a special art blocks token, but is there something else they can do there?
Yeah. And I think so the questions you're asking are all the right questions. And I think this is probably one of the most interesting second order effects of the Blur OpenSea outcome, which is, I actually think one of the most interesting design spaces over the next 6 months are going to be communities attempting to solve the exact questions that you're asking right now. It's how do you create an environment around, I used a great word, loyalty, that keeps people within your ecosystem so that you can kind of like protect and configure and incentivize folks to act in the best possible way for the future growth of your community. I would say this march to efficiency is inevitable. Like, I think this was always going to happen, just given how technology works and the inevitable, the outcomes we see where it's just a race to zero and efficiency is everywhere when we're dealing with disruptive technology. It's just on what time frame. I think the natural like order of like sequencing is, okay, once that starts to happen, how do the incumbents start to, fight back or protect or do things that make like challenge some of those pre-existing, those new ideas in ways that protect the community or protect the things that they've done in the past.
Everybody does it. I mean, Sam, you have more insight here than probably both of us, but like, I pay for Uber One right now, and it's $10 a month, and it's a loyalty program that they have in place, and it gets me better cars, discounted rates, and that's my go-to. And I want that as applied to, art blocks. That would be killer. What are your thoughts on this, Sam?
I think there's a lot here. I think, I've been watching this with the PFP space. So we've already kind of gone through this whole thing with PFPs, right? Like, one thing we saw in PFPs is optional royalty essentially means minimum royalty, and there is, and I look at Azuki and Pudgy Penguins as two examples where the NFTs have gone up over the past 6 months, but royalties have literally gone to the bare minimum. So even these communities where people love the founders, love the team, are making money, see that NFT as part of their identity. Azuki in particular have gone to 0.5% royalties. And I think there was some sentiment that art blocks would be different, but the first 4 days of data suggests it's not at all. The average royalty paid on art blocks right now is 1.5% versus 7.5% 5 days ago. The average royalty paid on brain drops right now is 1.5% versus 7.5% 5 days ago. Art blocks over the past 3 days has 9 ETH in total royalties, which is the lowest in 18 months over any 3-day period. So the market is, what we're seeing is that there's something about the opportunity to anonymously not pay royalties and to Derek's wording, get the most efficiency possible that people are taking advantage of. And that's just the way that this optional royalty door, once you open it, it's very, very hard to, so the idea that art blocks is creating an exchange where people can pay royalties, well, they can do it right now. You default to paying royalties on OpenSea and Blur. That's the default mode. And if people wanted to do it, they'd be doing it. So I think I don't know, I am, based on the data I've seen play out in PFPs, I am skeptical, and I could be proven wrong. These could be different communities, but I am skeptical that over time, and the other interesting thing is that Blur, the first few weeks, the average royalty was about 2%. Like, people wanted to pay royalties in the beginning. And you just see that taper off over time to now where it's the absolute bare minimum. So I think these numbers go down over time, not up. That's just my speculation. And then, the other thing to the point, I think the idea that maybe we're going to get an environment where you get a lot of innovation around this. But things like...
This is where I'm leaning, yes.
But the idea, the things that have to happen is you have to get rid of, the idea, the art is the utility, kind of has to take a back seat. Because if you own the art, but you didn't pay royalties, you still got the art. The art's a utility. Now we're going to ask creators to be sheriffs, to say you paid royalties, you didn't. You're going to get special privileges.
Nobody wants to do that.
No, you're going to turn them into judges. Like some guy says that didn't pay royalties, but they say they did. Now you have to create special perks for your 2 tiers of art blocks holders. And I think I think it's going to be very difficult. Maybe though, and Derek, maybe friendship bracelets, maybe there's some sort of currency in here that starts to get rewards to people. I wouldn't count them out. And I think we are going to see innovation, but I do think it's going to be a step backwards in a lot of the things that the community prided itself on before around art being the utility, allowing artists to do art and to not have to focus on creating two separate tiers of NFTs. Like those are all some negative consequences.
Yeah. We're hitting on everything here. We should probably move on to the next story and wrap things up here, because we got some interviews and some very exciting stuff to get through at the end of this episode. But I will say that, like, in my mind, what we are going through right now is we are at the end of version 1 of Web3. Like we came out with a bunch of models that we thought were going to be really interesting, where we said, hey, guess what? There's going to be these things that are called these membership passes. And there's going to be these things that are, royalties back to artists. And it's always going to work forever in perpetuity. And this is like the holy grail. And we've cracked everything. And it turns out that's not the case, right? So we got to go back and reimagine and rethink and not screw people over and make sure artists are compensated in the right ways, and not play the cop here and try and beat down people that are just need a little bit of liquidity. There's a lot of things to work through. The good news is all of this is programmable and we can figure it out. And I am actually pretty bullish on some of the ideas that I've heard, and specifically with ones that we're working towards on the proof side as well. So I think we'll get to a good place, but it's going to be bumpy for the next 6 months, as we figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the 2 second order outcomes that I'm like excited about following are how this design space around creators and creator platforms starts to bounce back and tries to either protect or shapeshift their secondary business models to look a lot different in the future. I would say the second thing that I'm really focused on is this idea of, okay, so assuming royalties in perpetuity, like this annuity that's granted to every piece of creative object that gets put onto the Ethereum blockchain or Solana blockchain, assuming that is not a viable business model moving forward, I actually think it also does the job of like the space getting very fine-tuned around what the real sustaining business model is for creators moving forward. And I don't know exactly what that is yet, but this is where I think, to your point, Kevin, that you just you brought up, I think that exploration and that like design thinking and that creativity, this outcome in terms of this removal or this reduction of royalties in the secondary markets, I think it forces creators to start getting very creative about, okay, let's reopen the conversation about sustainable business models for us, for whether it's for one-of-one art, or if it's for generative art, or if it's for PFPs, or if it's for product and service NFTs, whether it's on layer 1 or it's on layer 2. And let's actually start thinking about what sustainability looks like for these different communities and sub-communities over time. And that is something I'm very excited to see happen.
And there's no one size fits all. I don't think there's going to be one model that comes out where we're all like, that's the one. You know what I mean? I just feel like right now we're in the world of an Amazon, where you have these massive marketplaces that come in, and it's like Amazon sets the rules, and everyone just piles in, and that's what happens. Like, there is no doubt that if Tyler Hobbs did a drop tomorrow and said, you have to buy it through my marketplace, or insert any blue chip artist here, it's my marketplace, these are the rules you play by, it can only be bought and sold through this marketplace, this is who I am, we'd all be like, all right, let's do it, right? But that's like moving from an Amazon model to a Shopify model, where you kind of control your own destiny, you set up your own rule set, and you have your own ecosystem that you hold and own the entire stack for. I don't know that that's going to be the solution, but I can see that being, especially once you hit a certain tier of artists, I could see it going more in that direction.
It's actually already happening at some level. If you look at like Captains or Kid Called Beast or Cock Punch or, Valhalla, a lot of the projects that are able to block exchanges and are blocking LooksRare and Pseudo they are in real time getting enforced on OpenSea and Blur. That was part of the warfare, was that agreement, that handshake between Blur and OpenSea that they will enforce on new projects. Now, the vulnerability that Blur took advantage of, which basically said, we can build on Seaport, which makes it impossible for us to get blocked. That vulnerability is still out there, so I think we'll see how this evolves. But there is a little bit of that going on right now. And the other thing with Tyler that's always interesting is like, you know, he made a ton of royalties on Fidenzas, but he made a lot more in QQL's Mint than all that put together. You know, we have seen other models that have really worked outside of the royalty space. So, you know, I agree. Stuff. Very curious to see how it goes.
When Tyler goes, I was chatting with him over text, and he's like, by the way, you're not going to hear from me for a couple months because I'm going to turn off my phone and go heads down and build something new. I'm just like, I need to move to Austin so I can go hang out and see what the hell he's working on, because like that dude is just so freaking brilliant. I love it. Okay, so we got to finish up, but one other quick, just, you know, quick little story to touch on. Why the I don't want to be negative. I love OpenSea, Coinbase. But why is Coinbase doing an L2? Like what's going on there?
Sam, you want to take this one first?
This is I struggle. I'm like really in the JPEG game and a little bit less in the L2 game. So Derek, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts. And I talked about it on the show today as well, but I really kind of focus on the NFTs they put out as opposed to what drove this. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'll keep it super high level, which is, listen, it's inevitable that in my view, decentralized applications are going to replace centralized applications. And a lot of the core business models for what Coinbase does today exists on very much like centralized rails. And there's all sorts of activities they can be leaning into that improve efficiencies, and essentially create new types of business models for their core centralized products. Not least of which could be lending, it could be decentralized trade, it could be NFT minting. There's all sort, like that design space is so rich, as we've seen over the last decade. And I think the only thing that's hampered that is like exactly what direction they would take in order to start, you know, like making more and more concerted steps towards that direction. It sounds like they've done a lot of soul searching in terms of like the environment, but the trust minimized environment that they want to just like, you know, put their energy and resources behind. And it sounds like they want to put it behind the EVM and the Ethereum ecosystem through this layer 2 product, basically powered by Optimism, and like the Optimism, like open source product that they can kind of fork and build to their own use cases, and having a little bit more control over that L2 environment that they want. It also gets back to the paper that I wrote a few weeks ago where I talked about like store value objects and products and services towards the end of that. The two things that have product market fit to me in the NFT space, and I'll use this as an analogy for why L2 and not L1 for Coinbase. The two things that have product market fit are store value objects, which as somebody who owns store value objects, I want them living on the most secure, trust minimized, censorship resistant database, and that today is Ethereum L1. But there's also this growing use case, and I think the long tail of digital objects that will exist are going to be products and services. And I, as a consumer of products and services, don't actually care about censorship resistant for a lot of those products and services. And so I'm willing to tolerate like a little bit less decentralization and a little bit more operational efficiency with the objects that I own that are products and services. And that, to me, represents something like an L2 or an Alt L1. And so by putting some of these use cases on an L2 that are going to look more like products and services over time, I'm trying to analogize it to like for the NFT crowd, like why they're going to an L2 and controlling it a little bit. And it's not going to be as sovereign or censorship resistant, but they are able to build more custom products and services on an L2 environment that they could then slowly decentralize over time, instead of trying to do it all on Ethereum L1 and suffer from the expensive, costs and settlement times that comes with building on an L1. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing them build an Ethereum L2 on the kind of the Optimism network, which is a type of rollup.
It's funny you say the costs and settlement times. That could also be applied to the cost and settlement times of dealing with the SEC. when you're in a world where they're coming after you because they're saying you can't stake, you're centralized, we know how to crack down on you. There is a world where, and I'm not saying this is why they're doing this, but if Coinbase, launches an L2, and they do make this and transition to a completely decentralized model for governance around that L2, they're able to then allow customers to proxy and deploy and do things like staking and other things that might, I don't know, it just puts them in a different position, right? Having a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah. And I would say, to your point, like, this is the other brilliant thing about forking from, or this optimism stack that they're doing and becoming part of the optimism collective, is they actually don't need to issue a token. Like, they are, this is going to be, they're going to use Ether. And there isn't a quote unquote, like, I mean, there doesn't need to be a consideration about whether or not they're running afoul of securities laws, because they're not issuing anything that could potentially look like an investment contract. And so I think this is part of the brilliance of, like, the move itself, which is, let's actually just leverage this decentralized object that already exists. It's called Ethereum. We can build more of like a custom tailored L2 on top of a very secure settlement network. I think this is probably a taste of what's to come, which is, I think many folks are going to start to do something very similar. And over time, if they want to tap into a greater pool of people, they can, you know, for decentralized sequencing instead of sole sequencing and stacking transactions themselves, maybe they'll partner up with the rest of the Optimism network and do something there. But for now, there doesn't need to be a token, and they get all of, like, the benefits of building on this decentralized, trust minimized environment.
Sam, anything to add there?
Don't have a lot to add. I mean, I think he covered a lot. I thought it was interesting on the NFT side. They did drop an NFT yesterday and didn't really say what it was. And a lot of people, like, were just like, ooh, mystery, let's buy. People bought as high as 6 ETH. And then they launched a new open edition today that was free and didn't really say what the one yesterday was. So this one that people bought for 5-6 ETH is now, at least this morning, was trading at 1 ETH. And people were kind of like, what's going on here? So that was a little bit interesting on the NFT side to see that happen.
And this was directly from Coinbase?
Yeah. Yeah. It was Jesse, who is, Jesse's actually a very good friend of mine. And I mean, one thing about Jesse, who's excited about this guy is one of the most pure guys in the space. Like, this is, if you have scammers on one side, this guy's at the polar opposite, just always thinking, what's in the interest of the space? How do we, he just truly believes in decentralization, in the financial movement.
Is this the circle that people are, like, the Pope is holding up in, like, all the memes and everything? Is that what you're talking about?
That was what they dropped yesterday, and it was everywhere. I mean, everyone was talking about it. So I feel like
Sam.
But
Sam, you're good friends with this guy. Like, give us some alpha here. Like, what's it all about?
What I'm telling you, man, this guy's so pure. You know, he's one of those guys. There is no alpha. The alphas read his Twitter, you know, because he likes to do things the right way. You know,
okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you own one?
No.
You don't own one of the circles?
I got 256 Blur, man. I don't do a whole lot of that. I'm not the guy who's going around buying NFTs that much.
I just, if you owned a circle and you have a good friend that made the circle, I might buy a circle, but you don't own one, so I'm not going to get one.
Sam's above board. Sam's above board.
Those circles went from, like I said, 6 ETH to 1 ETH, I think, you know, so I don't know what really happened there on the NFT side, but I do have a ton of respect for Jesse. I'm curious to see how this plays out. That's
awesome. Cool. All right. So one of the things we want to do for the second half of this show is change it up a little bit. We didn't have just a ton of news this week, but the great news is that I had a chance to sit down with a gentleman by the name of Pablo. Derek and I got to meet him at this little collector summit that we did. Very, very thoughtful, deep collector. Is just has one of the most stellar collections out there. I mean, he was one of the early collectors of Beeple, bought a Beeple for $60,000 and sold it for $6.6 million 4 months later. Like, very prescient, very early in these things. I got a chance to sit down with him today and ask him a lot of the questions about, like, what he looks for in an artist, like how he identifies new up and coming artists. What are his thoughts on AI art? What are some of the AI artists that he likes now? So we covered a bunch of different things. We're going to roll that for the second half of this. And above and beyond that, Pablo has something called Beyond Digital, which is an exhibition that is at Venus Over Manhattan in New York City, which is a really well-known gallery and actually was one of the very early supporters of Snowfro and got Chromie Squiggles on the map in front of a lot of traditional collectors. So he has that going on until March 14th. So if you happen to be out there in New York, definitely make your way over to Venus Over Manhattan to check it out. But yeah, Pablo has collected, like I mentioned, Beeple, POC, Dimitri, Xcopy, and it was just a really fun chat. Also, before we get to that video, though, we have an upcoming artist spotlight from Terrell Jones. And Sam, you interviewed Terrell. Do you want to tell us more about that one?
Yeah, I mean, Terrell's just such a fun guy to talk to because 2 years ago or so, he was delivering boxes for FedEx, and, you know, kind of got an account on Foundation. He's been drawing since he was a kid. Says his aunt was his biggest inspiration as an artist. And, you know, he says something like, put the eyes on me and I'll do the rest, you know, and then he launched his Foundation piece. It took 5 months before it sold. And then slowly, just through hustle, community, making art that's colorful and interesting and kind of captures your attention in this world where there's so much art, ended up, you know, now he's got a Sotheby's sale going on. He's got sales 15 to 20 ETH, in some of his one-of-ones. And he's done some, you know, he was doing open editions before they were big. He saw it on Manifold and said, you know, this is going to be a big thing. So just an interesting guy to talk to. I love talking to him. I think his work jumps off the screen, which is super exciting. And I hope everyone tunes in next week and enjoys it as well as the short we're about to show.
I know with this digital age where you can see probably 1,000 pieces of art a day, I wanted to be able to stick with people longer than just like passing by. I wanted people to be able to link my art to different times in their life. I kind of started off as a portrait artist. Collections like Joy and Wonder, The Good and Evil. The portrait thing came through. So like a lot of the characters that you'll see me draw with like the portraits and stuff kind of end up looking like me. And that's a character that I made named Terry, based off childlike version of myself. Just trying to capture that feeling of imagination and kids thinking that anything is possible and trying to reignite that spark in us as adults now. I remember times when I was a kid, me and my brothers and sisters would just be like digging through the recycling bin, and we would take a bunch of the cardboard. We would just make like our own little costumes or build cardboard forts. It's definitely inspired by a lot of those old gangster films, whether that's Goodfellas, Scarface, Godfather, Sopranos. I just really like that kind of sense of camaraderie and like that like family vibes. Having a community is a very big thing. Even if that's just like you and your friends, just making a group chat and just sharing art with each other. I'm a lover of art at the end of the day, and I just like to buy good art and promote good art. Good art wasn't necessarily championed as much as it is now. I want to be part of that change, get it there.
All right, so that full video will be out on Tuesday, the 28th. Sam, thanks for doing that interview, and I really hope you enjoy this collector spotlight that's coming up right now with Pablo. It's going to be great. Pablo, I am so thrilled to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Kevin. The pleasure and honor is really mine. Thank you very much.
You know, I'll give people a little bit of context as to how we first met without disclosing too much, but we were invited to a private little NFT gathering, you know, a little round table that was with some pretty high profile collectors to really just discuss the industry, you know, artists, things that are hot, like what's going on. You know, you were there and you were giving feedback and kind of like chiming in on the conversation. And you quickly realize the different levels and depth that there are with professional NFT collectors. And you know, we've got everything from at the lowest end, like people that just degen into crypto dick butts. And then you have, you know, the hardcore researchers that approach this from a, you know, a combination of traditional art as applied to digital art. And everything that you said was just so thoughtful and well thought out. I was like, I have to have this guy on the show. So very excited to get your take on what's going on as a professional collector. You have just an amazing collection and a great eye for this. So yeah, but I think the best thing to do would be just to tell people who you are, like a little bit of your background, how you got started in this space would be great.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the kind words. I really, really appreciate that. That was a fantastic setting with a lot of lovely individuals. So I was actually lucky that I was brought up in a family where architecture, art was always very centric. While my parents were never true like traditional collectors, it was always around at home and when we traveled. Additionally, I'm married to my wife, who's an architect, she's a designer, she's an artist herself, and not a professional artist, but she's a painter, she's a photographer. And, we've been collecting art now since well before this digital revolution. Certainly not at the pace as of now, but since well before the revolution.
Mhm.
Now, my professional activities ended up taking me through the blockchain. I've been here for close to a decade now, and I was lucky that I got to witness NFTs, the power of NFTs, the technology of NFTs since very early on. At the beginning, through the concept of the metaverse, I was early into the Decentraland. Both as an investor and also as a landholder and as a developer in general of venues in the Decentraland as a participant. Now, I quickly, after a few months, we quickly realized what was also happening, the revolution that was taking place in the art domain of this NFT revolution, and that's when we started, grabbing more attention towards that.
Yeah, that's great. So when you first got started, you saw the NFTs were first starting to become a real thing, like a real collectible asset. What was that moment for you? Like, what did you use? What did you lean on in terms of just your internal gut instincts as to why this would be something bigger than just a fad?
The reality is that I think it was a combination of a few things, Kevin. It was first and foremost, of course, I had an understanding of the technology and I had seen what it had done, to traditional finance, to DeFi, and just in general through the movements. I am aware that this technology is not a fad, but a real innovation. And I was certain of the fact that digital ownership is a true, valid form in the same way that we have physical ownership today. Actually, the ownership of digital assets is something that I could, mathematically prove that I own. And for me, it was very clear. We're going into a world where it's more and more digital over time.
Yes.
But I'm very excited with the general idea of ownership of virtual world, of self-ownership of virtual world, and the ability of community creation in these worlds.
You are known for being a fantastic kind of like, one-on-one and an artist collector. I'd love to like transition to that part of your journey. Like, I know that you had that famous Beeple sale that would be good to talk about. Walk me through that process.
For me, it was very organic. So I started really getting very close to one of the artists that I was collecting and helping them with everything really outside of the creative component. I'm not very creative myself. I'm not very artistic myself. But I was helping them in strategy, which platform, pricing, just in general, structure, even some social media, even some personal finances, some personal things in general, just being around of support. And I never charged a cent for that. And I was always out of passion, out of wanting to put the space forward, out of legacy. And two things I think happened, which is I was able to foster very strong relationships with the artists that are a lot more than just transactional. They have a friendship, a trust component that I think is very rare, and therefore also an influence in an honest way, in a positive, influential way, but an influence in that regard.
It's the only way to do it, by the way. I think what you nailed is absolutely right. I know so many people that try to work with artists and they put business first, and they have to understand that that's not it. Like I don't know about you, but I want these like durable, real friendships. Like the key is truly not how many like followers you have or how many pieces of artwork that you buy from them. It's like, actually finding something, some common ground, some way that you can like step in and help them in an authentic way and not ask for anything back, right? And build real friendships through that model.
I think so, and I think a little bit of that's actually a little bit of what happened with Beeple in particular. Beeple was very smart. I think when he came into the scene, I was lucky enough to have I think a couple conversations or three before his first release with him, and I understood that he had all those virtues that really make an incredible artist, that were going to be a leader, that he had all the discipline, all the right accomplishments, all the right accolades for the other creators, all the right mindset, that energy, that sense of humor, as you mentioned. I saw all of these things with Beeple, and he had his first release. He had two single edition pieces that I think it was going to be a very relevant moment. His inclusion to the space, I really saw him as a leader, so I decided to really go for them at the auction, and I acquired both of them for 66,000. A few months later, obviously, the people. Mania really started coming around. He did another release that was very well received. Good secondary sale really says, hey, the digital art here is for real. We have to understand that back then, when these people sale happened, there was nothing nothing had been closed at those levels for anything with art. It was a humongous step, but it was a statement really in saying, hey, digital art is here. Digital art is very valid. Digital art is here to stay. And
so for people that don't know the whole story there, so you acquired this for 66,000. You picked up with 2 pieces, is that correct, of Beeple's work?
Yeah, each for 66. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you sold. Was it one of them, or was it
one of them? One of them.
Okay, and you sold one. What was 4 months later? 5 months later?
That is correct. 4 months later. Yeah.
What was the sale? What was the hammer price? What was the sale price on that one?
It was 6.6 million.
6.6 million. Insane.
And yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. And I think what I'm curious is, do you have your own internal checklist of things that when you're evaluating a new artist, you say, I like to see these attributes in an artist?
First of all, you need to have a connection to the work, whether that is directly aesthetic connection or any other form of emotional connection. Even conceptual art sometimes you don't have that aesthetic connection, but you have other type of connection. And then I like to see mastery of the tool. So which ultimately leads to the right execution, because there's many creative people now around the world, but it takes a lot more than that to actually have a successful long-term career. I do the research. I try to always speak with the artist. I understand where their previous work was, where that work is like what it represents as an evolution from where it's coming, and in general, the vision of the artist moving forward. And if I like that, I generally again acquire a full set of works or a comprehensive support over time to that artist, where I become a patron over time.
Yeah. Do you mind diving into your collection and telling us about the artists that you're excited about, the artists that you've collected, the artists that you currently hold? Can you share some of that with us?
I was actually Rafik's first real collector coming in and supporting Rafik in this tokenized world when he came into the scene in the Gateway a few years ago. I think we're all very happy to see the things that are happening around him. And the reality is that Rafik is an interesting character, because like an interesting artist, because his work appeals to everybody. I'm a huge fan personally of Pac. I think Pac is one of the most important, if not the most important, digital creator of this movement. I think they're some of the most sophisticated, the ones that really utilize the tools, as I was mentioning before, to the highest degree of execution. And I'm a huge fan of Pac. I happen to own. Yeah.
Can we unpack that? That was a horrible pun, but can we actually? I didn't mean to even say that. I swear. Who is Pac? What are you drawn to? What have they done that has pulled you into being a collector?
Concepts for conceptual digital art, I think, is at a different level. For me, it all started probably with the Pixel, which Pac's Pixel for me really represents the first real digital instance of conceptual art. I think one of the most significant works ever created, and that's part of my collection. And from there, I just saw that he was using this technology and this medium in a way that nobody else was doing so. He's the first one that's doing dynamic works in many ways, and he was always also thinking in innovative ways of distribution. So different auction type of formats. Really, we was the inventor of open editions. And even though that, we have a different thoughts around that now, but in general, he's done a lot of innovations in that space. So
he was doing open editions, obviously before it was cool, like quite a while ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was through a release that was called X, which it's one of my favorite releases by Pac.
If you had to go in and say, hey, these are the 10 artists, or it doesn't have to be 10, but these are the artists where in the last couple of months have caught my attention, where I'm starting to take them seriously, and I'm starting to place some bets here and invest in some of these artists. Are there ones that are hitting your radar, or anyone on the more recent side that still, let's just call it sub 10 ETH, that are exciting to you?
Sub 10 ETH. What I would say is that there's an artist that I've been in love for a very long time, but I think she's extraordinary. She's very relevant for today's work. She's a female artist that works with AI. Her creations are just beautiful. They're engaging, they're innovative, and they are, I think she's going to be absolutely wonderful.
Who is that?
Her name is Sofia Crespo. And then again, in a more art-centric setting, I like Davide Quayola, perhaps not under 10 ETH, a little bit higher than that. He's truly what the definition of a contemporary impressionist, digital contemporary impressionist painter might look like, and his works are extraordinarily sophisticated and give that great balance between the traditional and the more digital world. I actually have an exhibition open right now with Adam Lindemann and his gallery, Venice over Manhattan, where we have several of the different fields within the work represented in this showing. A lot of the interest has come actually for David Guayola, because it really translates well that the more traditional collector with the more digital collector. So those are a few of my picks, and of course I could never leave Andres Reisinger behind, which I think Andres Reisinger is, for me, a very, very special creator.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Sophia as well as one of our Grails 3 artists, which is nice to see. I'm curious, when you think about genres that you collect, we all have seen in the last few weeks the explosion of and really AI art being taken seriously, it seems, amongst some collectors. AI wise, is that something that you're starting to lean more and more into?
There's going to be some artists that really elevate themselves by either modifying the creations of the AI or becoming the best prompters. I still think there's certainly a lot of room for just work that is just aesthetically and visually just very strong, or conceptually very strong. I like, again, the works that utilize the medium properly. So programmable art. I think that async, for example, is a very interesting platform that has mostly stayed under the radar, but I think that what async brings is very relevant to the space. Art that can really be shared, and to program to do different things as they own there together.
I've always had a hard time collecting that, though, right? Because there's individual layers. What are you buying? Are you buying somebody else's creation? Are you not? You know what I mean? Like, how do you think of that as a collector when it comes to the remixable, more dynamic async style art?
I actually love it. I just wish, honestly, async is one of my absolute favorite platforms in the space. The reality, though, is that still the user experience needs to improve just a little bit for it to be easier to do these changes. But for me, it's very exciting. I envision some of these works to be in future museums, in future institutions, where different people will own the layers of these artworks, and will be dynamic works that change over time.
Oftentimes, a very famous question that they used to, I think it was an interview question we had at Google, which was, what do you believe to be true that no one else does? And I would love to hear that answer from you.
It's a variation of an answer, because it contains like two things, but really we need to make the user experience so much better in the industry. We need to, and this goes by pricing things in US dollars, allowing other forms of payments, and just not, force-feeding everybody into having their MetaMask. This will come over time, whether it's MetaMask or something else, but I actually think that we need to make it super easy for everybody else. Every consumer-facing application of anything in the past that has been successful at a global level, I've always had a very easy user experience as it's well distributed. So I think that in general, forgetting about the ethos of the blockchain, it's okay if some things don't have utility. It's okay if you're just collecting something just for the sake of being art, and it's okay if the ethos of the blockchain and the full decentralization, ideals are not fully represented by a particular asset. Maybe you're just trying to seek ownership of a digital asset in there.
Any other hot takes, controversial things that you want to mention before we wrap things up that might be things that just people aren't considering, or things that you think about a little bit differently?
More than a controversial comment, though, I would say I would like to do a little bit of a sale, if possible.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I would like kind of like to say that the current, there's a show now with Adam in New York, in Venice over Manhattan, which is the first time that an established gallery has done a tokenized show of this regard, where it's all secondary works of all of these main artists from different fields, and it's open until March 14th. It's they have done an incredible job at the curation, at the display. It feels very elegant, very sophisticated, very keen to art that you can live with, and it has a few as well of digital creations that are manifested physically. So there's a few goodies there that I think are going to be difficult to find otherwise.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Definitely, for anyone that's in that area, you have to go check this out. Like, I will say that Adam has been so prescient in finding early great artists in this world. Like, one of the first to represent Snowfro and Chromie Squiggles, and really bring that whole bridge, that gap between traditional art collectors and, this new digital NFT collectors? Like, did you help curate it? What is that?
Oh, yes. So the show is, it's works from my collection. Works available commercially from my collection. And again, the idea, together with Adam, we were having different conversations. And I admire Adam a lot. As you say, he has already proven many times, both in the traditional world and in the digital world, I guess a lot of things to bring to the table. And the idea came out to expand on the audience, the reach that of digital art to present and again, trying to validate the art movement and create that bridge with the traditional world. So that's a little bit the idea.
I love it. It's such an important piece that anytime I see people doing work in this space, they have to realize we have to bring others along for the ride, right? Like 2 years ago, it would have been, insane and just unheard of to hear about, large funds coming together on the institutional side, purchasing and holding NFTs. And now, I can point to a handful of household name, both on the venture side and private side funds that are collecting NFTs, which is just really exciting to see happen. And it's not because I want the rich to get richer, but it's because they're helping actually validate the space, and they bring in other collectors of all types as well. It's huge. It validates and helps correct some of that negative PR that we get out there on the major news networks.
Very positive. This is actually how it fully permeates society outside of our niche of digital collectors. This is actually how we expand the audience a lot. And I welcome everybody to continue on this. I applaud Cosmo for the contributions. And I'll have an announcement to make in the near future about Resika and the MoMA that of our involvement with Resika and the MoMA, which I think has really opened up the gates.
Fantastic. A little bit of alpha there for go get your Rafiks now. So Pablo, yes. You obviously a brilliant collector in this space. Do you have any platforms where you kind of pontificate and share these ideas?
Yeah, I'm generally quite active is not the right word, but I'm a little bit active in Twitter, where I share some of the thoughts and a little bit of activities that I do, and a little bit on Instagram as well. And then on a more daily basis, I'm of course behind Aries, which is the culture institution, the platform, a little bit of a marketplace, a little bit of everything combined, where we elevate digital artists in a physical manifestations, and again trying to take my philosophy into an actual experience through there. So I'm quite
Where can
active.
people learn about that?
Well, we do have the website aorist.art, aorist.art. Again, we've done releases there in the website and in my Twitter. There should be links with that. But we work with many of the artists that we mentioned today. Again, trying to bring art-centric, digitally native works of art to physical events and locations around the world.
Awesome. Well, Pablo, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's so great to pick your brain on this type of stuff. You have such an impressive collection that I'm very, very jealous of. And you're welcome back on the show anytime, especially to talk about any new exciting artists that or hot takes that you have on where this market is going. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.